Welcome back to the Creative Media Practice Research Insights podcast, where we explore how creative work becomes creative knowledge. Today we're stepping into a space that every creative practitioner encounters, but few get to see from the inside, the development room. I'm joined by two guests whose careers give us a unique view of what happens to creative ideas once they leave the spark stage. Emma Millions is a development producer and screenwriter who has shaped, refined and pitched hundreds of projects. Paul Jackson is one of the UK's most influential television producers and executives, known for work across comedy, entertainment and major broadcast leadership roles. Together we're going to explore how ideas evolve, survive and sometimes get made. So thank you, Emma and Paul, for coming. I mustn't clap in front of the microphone. That's a really bad thing to do.
Very
Yeah. Emma, could you just do a very short self-introduction, and then we'll pass on to Paul, and then we'll kind of start some questions.
Okay. Well, you did pretty much a good job there. I am a writer and a development producer. I work across both scripted and unscripted, which does give me a unique insight. I've been doing it for over 30 years, watched the industry change beyond all recognition, been in development rooms, taken ideas from non-existing, just nothing, to being a thing that's on television or on film somewhere. Have with my teaching work as well, I teach in a lot of places, so I hear a lot of pitches from lots of different people at different levels, so I have got lots of insight into what makes a good pitch and how you recognise when there's an idea there or when there isn't.
Paul?
Well, I'm very old in this party. I joined the BBC in 1971, so I've been looking at this business, and I left it. I've been out of the business for about 10 years, I would think, and it's changed beyond all recognition. I mean, in 70, I left the BBC for the first time in the mid-80s. I went back as an executive after that, but even when I went back in the early 90s, the idea of development as a specified job was non-existent. We didn't have development teams. We didn't really have pitch meetings as such. It was a completely different system. So I've seen the birth of this idea of trying to think about and discover ideas and having people work full time on creating them, and the kind of very specialised and very clear skill set that's now required to do that kind of job. That's all come about in the last 30, 40 years while I've been sitting there watching it happen. And now, of course, it's an absolutely essential part of the business, such as the business is. I mean, the business is disappearing, the broadcast business is disappearing in front of our very eyes. But I just hope we find something that will replace it, because television is a unique form of media. It's not a novel, it's not a film, it's not a concert, and it does bring something to the social well-being of society, I think. And I think it's important to have it, preferably on a shared basis, not on an individual YouTube one-off type basis.
So here's a question for both of you. Can you each remember the last time someone brought you an idea that made you sit up and take notice?
Well, literally just a couple of hours ago, somebody pitched an idea to me that I said, if you make a tape and you send it to me, I will help you. That doesn't happen very often. It's happened once here. Don't know if you remember when a student pitched basically an edgy "you come dine with me" idea, and I was like, that's great, send it to me and I'll help you develop it. They didn't.
Did they send it? No, they don't. I think they I've seen that happen, and they don't send it because they're just they don't lack the confidence. They lack the confidence to actually go, oh, well, I'm just going to send it out and see. They don't feel like this is something that's really ready, but they should,
Well, I guess as well they don't fully understand what the term development means, which means, you can start the day with 2 words, like, mash 2 words together and go, science pet show. And then by the end of the day, you can have a format because you've done the development, or that development might take a really long period of time.
So just for context for anyone listening, we are at Southampton Solent University, and we've just done a pitching panel for a group of first years who've been pitching short ideas, and so that's one of those ideas was really strong. What was the strength of that idea?
First of all, it was the zeitgeisty nature of it. The subject matter was really now. There was a clear audience for it. But then the student had unique access, which is always sellable. So clear audience out there, clear access. The potentially good talent, that was the thing that was missing, was being able to see what the talent was like. But if a bit of tape could be made, then we'd see whether the talent was good enough. But so there was multiple elements that made this into a clear thing that you could imagine was actually on TV. You can imagine that being on TV tonight, and it's not a stretch.
Absolutely, and I think you're right, the zeitgeisty nature of it, the nowness of it.
Yeah.
Paul, what about you? When was the last time something that really made you sit up in the pitch?
Well, I was in the same meeting with you two guys, and I think the particular reason that out of the 10 or 12 that we saw, all of which were interesting and people had thought about it and come with proper ideas, and credit to you, the course, they'd only been here at the first term of their lives at uni, and they all sat there and pitched. Some were nervous, some weren't so much, but they were good, you know. The thing about this particular idea was it was very specific. Documentaries in some ways are the easiest thing to pitch, because if you've got a good idea, and particularly if you've got access, as we call it, you know, if you can get inside Selfridges or you can get inside the Hampshire Police Force or whatever it might be, if you've got that access, and this student had access to a young lady who looks as though she might have a very promising career in women's football. Women's football is very zeitgeisty at the moment. And really, the only question is this girl as good on camera as he thinks she is? And if she is, then why wouldn't you make a story about, you know, we're all in the business of storytelling. I think that's a really important point to remember about this whole game. You know, human beings are storytelling animals. I mean, when you go right back to the cave drawings and you go back to the Greek idea of the shadow play up on the wall, we survive by telling ourselves stories. We are big market finance people will tell you it's all about the story. So whether you're doing documentary or children's or sitcom or an entertainment show, Britain's Got Talent has got a story. It's an entertainment show. So it's all about stories. Human beings are committed to stories. And this guy had a simple story. And if the girl at the centre of it is as good as he thinks she is, come on, it's the story. Give it to me.
So, Paul, as a senior producer and commissioner, what signals tell you something could work specifically for an audience?
Well, I think that, to be honest, you have to say you don't know. You never know. So I've been lucky enough to make some hit shows like Young Ones or Red Dwarf, or I didn't make Britain's Got Talent, but I was involved with it. The truth is, at the beginning of those shows, people say to you, you know, did you know it was going to be massive? No, you hope it's going to work, but you don't know it's going to be massive. And I think what you have to do is, as creator of the piece, you have to understand what you want to say, what you're trying to do, and you then have to do it to the best of your ability to get it onto a digital, you know, onto a recorded piece of material. So I remember on the first night of the first episode of Young Ones, when it went out on BBC Two at 9 o'clock on a Monday, we all watched it at my house, the main actors and writers. And then we went for a curry afterwards. And what we were saying to each other then was, as we saw it there on the screen, look, that is as good as we could have done it. That is what we wanted it to look like when we first wrote it, or in my case, read it, or in the actor's case, read through it. We've done the best we can to create that. If nobody likes it, well, okay, we were wrong. Let's hope some people do. The worst thing is when you set out to do something and it doesn't work, and you know it's... and there is nothing worse than being caught in the middle of a production that you know is not working. You've got another 4 weeks to go, you know, and you just have to keep churning it out. And that does happen. I think it's very unusual that you literally know, you know, I read a lot of about pop music of the 60s, 70s, 80s, because I'm a big fan. And occasionally they'll say to you, we just knew. We just wrote that and we just knew. But very often you don't.
Emma, do you have anything that you would say is kind of gives you a sense of promise in terms of audience?
As Paul says, as the industry mantra is, nobody knows anything.
William Goldman, copyright.
Yeah. And I don't think that's true to some extent, but it also is true, because there are obviously surprise hits and things that nobody can understand why anybody likes, and why they go so far. But I think there are ways of making it hooky, so that there's things for people to talk about. I read the other day, Paul, someone's writing about the young ones, and they said what grabbed the young audience was that there was like catchphrases that you could do in the playground, and you could talk about it the next day at school and go, oh my God, did you see that thing that Vivian did? Oh my God, Rick was so funny. And I think that's been proved again with something like Celebrity Traitors. But with Celebrity Traitors, that was much more orchestrated than it would have been for the first episode of The Young Ones. Right?
I think that's a big difference. So nowadays, I said there was no such thing as development teams. There was no such thing. There was audience research, but it was just telling you what the numbers were. I mean, that's what you got. You got a thing at the BBC called the AI, the Appreciation Index, which was a kind of, did you like it or didn't you? And you got the audience numbers. Now there's massive research departments looking at every individual thing and what we need now. We need to, and of course the whole thing is so much more fragmented. So when I started at the BBC, there were 3 channels: BBC One, BBC Two, ITV. So to be honest, if you got 20% of that audience on one of 3 channels, you're talking millions of people. So it was so much easier. Whereas now, it's on BBC Three. Well, it has to have this appeal. It has to, they cast people nowadays partly on what their social media numbers are. So you've got I'm Celebrity on at the moment with 2 people I've never heard of and couldn't care less about, Angry Ginge and H. I don't know who they are, and I'm not interested in either of them. But they will be on there because their social media numbers must be very good. Now, I personally think that's a diminishing returns job, because I don't think their audience particularly watches primetime television in the first place. And meanwhile, you're alienating a whole load of people who do watch it and really don't care about these 2 kids who don't relate to us at all. So it's much more difficult at the moment. And there are, as Em will tell you in detail, that you've got to have this, you've got to have a hook, you've got to have a beat, you've got to have transferability, you've got to have TikTok clippability. We never did that. We just thought that was funny and we shot it.
And yet, a lot of those shows are hugely TikTok clippable. I mean, I watch the Young Ones all the time in my YouTube feed.
Young Ones and Red Dwarf, which I suppose are the 2 shows that I'm best known for, they've both generated massive memes and massive clippability, which is because they both caught something of a zeitgeist. They caught something of the human condition. I think it's so much harder to be a young person now than it was certainly when I was in the 60s. I mean, it was, why wouldn't you want to be 17 in the mid 60s? For God's sake. It's much harder now, but the tropes and the types of the kind of laid back hippie and the guy the punker wants to fight, and the self-regarding right on environmentalist, they're all types that we get, and they were very big, bold, drawn types, and so they've survived. And I love the fact that I feel slightly sorry for the writers and the actors who created it, who get not a penny from all this coverage. So I do have a worry about the finances of the modern media industry, because so much of it is given away for nothing. And at the end of the day, you're not going to be making many episodes of Stranger Things unless somebody's putting up the money.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely a challenge. So Emma, can you describe the typical journey an idea takes through development?
Well, there's no such thing as a typical journey through development, but there's obviously stages that are always the same. First of all, it's either you have the idea or someone comes to you with the idea, or you find the idea. You never steal the idea. The person who idea it is the best person to help you with development. Then you have to recognise what that idea actually is, because somebody might come to you with an idea that they believe is a feature film. You realise it's a podcast, or you realise it's something else. So then you have to listen to the idea and work out what medium it is, and And then you have to pull it apart to try and find out what the elements are that are there that make it sellable. Like sometimes that's really clear, like with the young footballer idea, young female footballer, it's already 3 boxes ticked, right? Young female footballer, 13, astonishing age, starting out on her career, access. It's starting to become a package, which is what you have to do with development. It's make the idea not just an idea that exists in your head. It has to be a package that you can put into somebody else's head and make them want to buy it or watch it. So basically development is going from stupid idea that you woke up with in your dream that's actually turned into something, to turning it into the actual thing that you can sell to somebody else who then you just let go, they go and make it. This is the reason why I've always loved development, and I couldn't believe it when development started to become an actual job when I first moved into the industry. You actually want to pay people to sit in a room and talk about ideas, make those ideas good, and you don't have to make them. That's brilliant.
We used to have to make it all as well, yeah.
No, I do definitely see that as a dream job, isn't it, really?
I think it's an absolute dream job. I mean, it didn't exist when I started, but it's also a good entry-level opportunity. You can, and we always tried to when I never ran development teams, but I had them in my departments. And you always try to bring in a couple of students into the room because, they'll have a different viewpoint and different ideas. I remember we had trouble when I was running BBC Entertainment, we had trouble in the light entertainment section, the Jane Game, the house party, that kind of area. And it was all going south and the shows were getting tired. And I brought in a new head of variety, a man called David Young. And he came into BBC from Hat Trick and he said, I want to create a development team. I said, fine. He said, I want to put an advert in the Guardian media for people who never worked in television but think they know all about it and think they could do it. And and that's what I want. I want 6 people who've never been. And I said, okay. And I'd clear it with my bosses. And then he said, I only want it in 1 week. And I said, oh, come on, give him a go. He said, no, if you want this, the people I want have got to be so hungry. If you want this, you look at The Guardian every week the moment it comes out. If you missed it, you're on holiday, I don't want you. And that's what we did. We put it in for 1 and we got a development team of 6, 3 at least of whom have gone on to become incredibly successful in the business, mainly in development. Mike Beale and Andy Lupton and people. And they came up with Friends Like These. They didn't come up with Weakest Link. That came in as an idea from a doctor, in fact, just sent in. But they radically reformed it and formatted it into a successful show. I can't remember. Eggheads. They came up with a lot of ideas that are still running now. And David's whole point was they don't know anything about television. That's what I want.
That's really interesting, actually. So I was going to ask, what is it that convinces you that an idea is worth backing?
I think it's different with different things. The documentary that we've both been talking about, that's what you want for a documentary is a clear idea and the access to make it. And he's got both. That's almost the simplest. With a scripted, whether it's comedy or drama, quite honestly, you want to know who the writer is. That's the bottom line. And we were lucky with Young Ones because those were completely untested writers. Nobody had ever heard of them. At least with Red Dwarf, Grant Naylor were kind of known writers. BBC would never do that these days. They're not going to give 6.5 hours to a completely untested writer. So the writing is, you need a good idea and you need what you think are going to be accessible and attractive characters and preferably some sort of hook around from the ether at the moment. And then with a format show like a Got Talent or a Traitors or whatever it might be, that's where I think you really do, both in the development room and in the pitch and in the buying, you interrogate and interrogate and interrogate. So you work through all the possible scenarios. But what about this? What about if one of them overhears a conversation they shouldn't have overheard? What about if they lie? And you've got to know the answer to all those questions, because the one question you haven't thought of, that'll happen on record. And if you don't know, you could lose very important essence of the show. So with those shows which are actually formats, as in the international format business, Squid Game and whatever it may be, you really need to interrogate those, and you're not going to buy them unless you're very convinced. I'll give you an example. not long ago, or 10 years ago maybe, there was a format that actually didn't quite work anyway, but nonetheless went round the world, and it was called Splash. And it was about diving. So, you know, this idea you take celebrities and put them in an unusual environment. It was that genre, and there's loads of them. There's ski jumps, there's car driving, there's whatever. And this one was about diving. And so you get 10 celebrities, they learn to dive, and we really only commissioned it. We did commission it at ITV, and we only commissioned it really because Tom Daly fronted it, and he was very hot at the time. But my worry about it, I wasn't at ITV at the time. My immediate reaction to that was, how long does a dive last? Well, it's less than a second. So supposing they do 3 each, so that's 30 seconds. And it's an hour and a half slot you've given it. And I never believed in that format. And of course it went out, and it kind of did okay. But in the end, there's no content there. So you've got to ask those questions of a format, and you do that in the development room, then, don't you?
Mm-hmm. You've got it's interrogation.
Interrogation.
Because you get so excited sometimes when an idea pops into your head. You're just, oh yeah, this is it. This is my goggle box. And then you get down into it, and you're like, oh, there's nothing in it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just have to let them go.
So you said earlier today, you said to one of the students, you used the phrase of an idea finding its shape or finding itself.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of a project that changed significantly during development, started off as this and what became that, and give us a sense of what changed?
So I would say every single idea that ever existed started off as one thing and became something else. But yeah, sometimes it's significantly different. And I know that phrase I used might sound a bit woo, but I've been doing this long enough that ideas talk to me, and I've got instinct, and so I can visualise quite quickly what's wrong with them and what needs changing, or what's right with them. Quite often someone will pitch me an idea and they've gone completely the wrong way with the hook or what they think it is, but I can see what's at the centre, and I'll go, well, yeah, all of that, well done, lots of good work, but can we get rid of all of that, and can I have this little bit, please, and then I'll make that into the thing it's supposed to be. And I bet you pretty much, I mean, the traitors, I'd love to see early tests of the traitors, because I bet it's completely different to what it looks like now. And then you'd be able to see their processes, because you have to try something out. Oh, that didn't work. Try something else out. So it's about just digging through the fluff, and as creators and writers, we all like to put all the fluff on top, and then we fall in love with our fluff. It's like when they say kill your darlings, right? It's just, sometimes you just have to go, well, that I just went, oh, I don't know what I was thinking. I went down a total rabbit hole, completely wrong. Let's come back and start again and go down a different path. So, yeah. I
think take a show we all know, like Millionaire, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? That started, I'm guessing I know a little bit about it, but that would have started by somebody saying, Bill Cotton, my mentor and major figure in BBC history, Bill Cotton always used to say to me, if you've got no ideas, look at the Radio Times from 20 years ago and see what's not on television. So for 20 years we didn't have dating shows, and then ITV came back with, what's it called, the Paddy McGuinness show.
Take Me Out.
Take Me Out. And the reason that worked, it's not one of my favourite shows, but because there'd been no dating shows, and dating shows are a staple of television, and okay, here's one. So in the late 90s, somebody was looking around, probably Mike and Steve, who created Millionaire, saying, well, we haven't got big money shows. They used to be the absolute bedrock of certainly American television. Quiz show, $64,000 show, W Money, all those shows were the bedrock of the primetime schedule, and we haven't done them. I mean, they became naff and they became uninteresting, and they were moved out of the primetime schedule throughout the Western world. And they said, well, hang on, if we could put a modern spin on what we call a money ladder show, that's what you call generically those shows, we might be, because there's none there, we might have something. And so I think, and then it went through a process. Now I think maybe people outside the business looking at that show, why was it suddenly so, the controller of BBC One at the time, Peter Salmon, called it the show that ate the schedule, because it destroyed his schedule 5 nights a week. It ran, 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, whatever it was, Monday to Friday. Completely devastated whatever he put on it, against it. And I think maybe people said, well, because it was $1 million. We'd never given away £1 million before. I mean, that's why everybody watched it. That's why it was so compelling. Partly, but that's not the real reason. I mean, Judith Keppel didn't win until 3rd or 4th series, whatever it was. What they did was, I think the biggest innovation in Millionaire is showing the answers. And they came up with that idea, which is now commonplace in The Chase and all kinds of other formats. You show the answers. But it was revolutionary at the time. And I know for a fact when Paul Smith, who owns it and became a multimillionaire, we used to call it Who Wants to Meet a Millionaire, because Chris Tarrant and Paul Smith were certainly millionaires at the time. When they pitched it to David Lidman at ITV, David was at it. He said, you can't give them the answer. You can't tell them the answer. And what Paul did was, David Lidman used to have a corner office, and it was a big general office outside with all the support staff. And he put his head out of the door and he read out a question and he gave them the 4 answers. And they came up with, a winner, but different. And that's how Paul convinced him, said it doesn't actually, if you don't know, it doesn't help having the 4 answers. Yes, it narrows it down, but you just, and now it's a completely accepted commonplace thing. They also then added very cleverly the helplines and the lock-in of the prizes. So from a simple money ladder idea, which if you look at $64,000 questions, it just doubles up. There's nothing else in it. You just answer more and more difficult questions until you get to the top. They put 3 or 4 different elements in, and they gave it a huge prize. And that's what made it probably the most successful television show ever, I would say, in terms of distribution. I can't remember how many countries it's played in, but it's something like 194 or something. There's only 200 in the United Nations, so virtually everywhere. The other big thing that made it successful was you can do it local. You don't have to, it's not a big expensive show, so you can do it in Poland with zloty and it's still a big show. So I think that shows you how a basic idea, let's do a money ladder, is a very different proposition from let's do Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
So okay, let's talk a little bit about constraints and challenges then. And what are the biggest what are the biggest reasons ideas stall in development?
Money. So yes, there's obviously money, and the world of slots. There are only a few, which basically places where your show or your idea can go. And obviously that's got a lot wider with streamers, but they still have a shopping list that is kept secret from the creators and creatives and production companies. And lots of people are vying for those virtual slots. And I've seen absolutely no-brainer, brilliant ideas die because their slots were filled for the right time that should be on this year, or they've run out of money. So it's the time of year in TV. I mean, TV's run out of money, full stop. But at this time of year, that's it, over until April. No hope of getting anything commissioned. Something can happen in between when you've pitched it now and when it comes up, when it gets to be a commissioning phase, that can totally wipe your idea out. Either something similar or something that's happened in the press that means your idea's too.
There was a famous American game show, quiz money show, which I don't know why they commissioned in the first place, because it was obvious what was going to happen. It was called Bomb, and there was you had to defuse a bomb, by pulling off the correct wires, and you had to answer a question right to pull the wire off, yeah. And they did it. They shot them, and there was a huge bomb went off in Tel Aviv or Los Angeles. I can't remember. And they had to show Fox at it. They had to show the whole series.
I mean, and that it's devastating when you've got really far, and then something outside of your control.
Well, they made it in this case. They'd actually made it.
But they should have seen that one coming, right?
Of course. I mean, everybody said when they announced the commission, well, I hope there's not a bomb going off in the next.
And that can happen in seemingly. There was a show, it's a bit like the Splash show on ITV recently, which was celebrities swimming with sharks. And again, it had the same flaws in that that's not enough content. But I was like, well, if there's any kind of shark-related incident in real life,
you're in
that
trouble.
show's off the
Plus,
air.
by the way, that show was done. Ruby Wax did that show with a lot of other celebrities. Exactly the same show about 12, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I have a similar example. I was working on a project. We'd managed to get a contract to work with some of Neil Gaiman's IP.
Oh,
And the project didn't go ahead for various reasons. It didn't go ahead. But had it gone ahead, 6 months later, we'd have been sat on a really big project that just couldn't have run.
yeah.
Well, Rory, I know a guy who's very close friends with Neil Gaiman, who was the producer I'd worked with. And he came to me years and years ago and said, I think I can get Neil Gaiman to either write a show for TV or we can adapt one of his works. And I went to the controller of BBC 4 at the time, because that's kind of felt at that time they were commissioning dramas and so on. And he said, I don't know who Neil Gaiman is. I've never heard of him. At that time, that was excusable. But I said to him, well, look, just Google him, just look it up. I mean, he's very, very hot and about to get hotter. No, I don't think so. I don't know who he is.
Missed the boat there. Okay, so what makes a great development relationship? What kind of what makes a good relationship, and what undermines a relationship in development?
So you've got to be really generous in development.
No bad ideas in development. No stupid comments. There is no such thing as a stupid comment.
Yeah, you've got to be able to bring out that trust. Because for very young newbies, they get an idea in their head and they're scared to say it out loud. And I will literally, if something comes into my head when I'm in a development room, even if I don't know why it's come into my head, I trust my head. And I might say, this is going to sound stupid, but this has just come into my head. Let's see where we go with it. There are no wrong things to say in a development room. So you've got to be able to build trust and encourage people to do that.
And it's a complete democracy as well. I mean, you've got to, normally I think it works better if you have one person kind of leading the discussion who has got some idea of what the end, where they want to slot it or what they're looking for. But it's a democracy, nobody's idea is better than anybody else. That's why David got all those people in from outside. Their ideas are just as valid as anybody else's.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than someone who goes, oh, well, that was my idea, or I said that first, or I said something similar to that last week. It's like, well,
David created a really good structure. Okay, we got these 6 people in. They didn't know anything about television, but he had to tell them, look, somebody here might get very rich, so we're going to set up this scheme. You're all going to be part of it. Doesn't matter if you were off sick on the day when that idea got. This is a cooperative, and you all share. I will possibly give extra points to one person if I believe that they really did put the kernel of the idea down. But anybody just coming up with an idea that will not be the end idea, we'll all contribute to it, and that's how we did it. And a lot of them made quite a lot of money. Andy Culpin, I said Andy Lupin earlier on. Andy Culpin.
Let's have some closing reflections. What should early career creatives understand about how development really works?
Well, early career creatives now need to understand that the industry is changing on a weekly, monthly basis. So you're going to need to understand how things, you're going to need to understand things that haven't even happened yet, basically. You've got to sort of have a future facing kind of notion. You've got to consume, I'd say you've got to consume a vast amount of media on vast amounts of mediums. That means you've got to be listening to podcasts. You've got to be, even if you, I'm not advocating spend all your time on social media, but you need to dip in and see what's happening on. I mean, I absolutely can't bear TikTok, but I do go on it every now and then just to go, what's happening on TikTok? So I think the biggest understanding, the biggest pressure that new development people have now is finding where your idea should go, finding out what it is and where it should go is much more complicated now. There's no one route. You don't just go and knock on the door of the BBC, get a meeting, or I was talking to a few producers that I knew from the 90s, and I used to go down Soho House, get drunk and come out with a commission. That doesn't happen anymore. So you've just got to be really, really smart. Part of the job of development is understanding, well, how can I take this from this bit of paper or this computer screen to a thing, and be as smart about your ways in, like, well, I know this producer who might know this bit of talent who might get attached if we do this. So the packaging has become more important. You have to be clever about all of it and be prepared to roll. So one of the greatest things I ever learned to do in development is just say yes, and then just go away and, you know, if you're in a commissioning meeting and they say, can you do it like this? You go, yes. And then you go away and figure it out.
It's the actor. Can you ride a horse? Can you sword fight?
Yes.
Yes, both of those things.
Yes.
And then you go and learn very quickly.
And it might be that they've, you know, completely misunderstood your idea, but then you could go away, tweak it a bit, reconvince them. Another great skill is convincing them that it was the thing that they said that made your idea so brilliant. If they hadn't said that thing, the idea wouldn't be as good. There's just, I think you're gonna have to be resilient. I mean, I do a huge amount of development for myself these days because people don't have teams anymore. Development teams are the first thing to go when there's a downturn. So I'm battling away at home, coming up with ideas, packaging them, trying to figure out who should I take them to, what can they do for me, how can I get them to do me a favour, all of that. So you're going to have to be resilient, you're going to have to be smart, you're going to have to learn how to use AI ethically and as a collaborator. If you can't use AI, no one's going to hire you. And you're just going to have to, understanding the industry is going to be much harder, but you're going to have to be on it all the time.
Paul?
I think very much in the same vein as what Emma's talking about. First of all, there were no development people, and then there were a big industry of development people. And at that time, what you really needed was a quick brain, ideas. You need to be open to the world around you. You needed at that time, you didn't have social media, but you needed to read. You'd be interested in the news, newspapers, movies, music. You needed a big hinterland because that's what you brought into the room. On the development, and all you were really worried about was getting the idea right. And then fairly quickly started to come in from the big broadcasters, well, we want something for Saturday night. We want something for BBC Two at 9 o'clock, at 10 o'clock on a Monday against the news. We want a documentary for... and so those more specific things. And I think in a way, development became less fun at that point because you now had to start working to the metrics. And I think now it's got even worse because I think the simple fact is we've been the beneficiaries for, what is it now, 50, 70 years, 75 years of this wonderful broadcast medium that we had in most of the Western democracies where all kinds of glorious treasures would just be thrown into your living room every single night. Drama, documentaries, music, comedy, whatever it was. And I don't quite see how that carries on, how that survives. So Emma and I were talking, you know, I'm well past the end of my career now. And so I am not invested in how this carries on. But I can tell you that the broadcast, not only is the broadcast model dying very quickly, but the streaming model is not sustainable. I mean, you can't make The Crown at 10 million quid an hour for much longer because even something as dominant as Netflix, that's a lot of money to recoup. And that is already starting to be undermined. So if you want to see The Crown or Stranger Things or whatever it is your favourite thing is, and, you know, the streamers have come up with some incredible shows, but that model, I don't believe, is a long-term model. I mean, it's no more than Blockbusters was. You know, it's just a different version of Blockbusters. And so I think young people coming into the business now, whether there's development, American networks used to distinguish between development and current, they used to call it. So you invented the shows and you made the shows, the current people. You've got to be both now. You've got to have an idea of how is this industry going to be funded? How am I going to get, I've got this drama. Who's going to, a drama, it's going to cost you £600,000-700,000 an hour if it's a fairly simple, straightforward. Where's that money going to come from? And I don't know the answer to that question, but the people who are currently hoping to go into that industry, they need to think about what the industry is and how it's going to work and how they can get their ideas heard. And it may be that a podcast or a graphic novel or a different way of approaching it. But it'll be a terrible tragedy if that's all that's left. I mean, podcasts at the moment, gangbusters, people making millions literally out of them, Gary Lineker famously. But, you know, if that's the total landscape, then I love podcasts. I listen to them all the time. But if that's it, that's an impoverishment of the medium.
It's it's definitely challenging times, and it's very changing times. And I think for us in higher education, where we're potentially educating people to leave in 3 years' time into a media landscape, that media landscape is definitely going to be very, very different.
Absolutely.
But nobody knows what it is or what it's going to look like or what we have to teach anymore. So I think it's kind of is very uncertain.
Well, here's the thing, Rory, and you may not agree with me, but and I'm not in it anymore, so I don't know for sure, but what I hear, I think the education point is very important, because one of the things that I suspect since the pandemic is that teaching is growing more and more online, that the in-person, the in-class element is diminishing all the time. That is the death. That's the death of the business, because television and film are cooperative endeavours. You have to know how to work with people. You have to know how to be in a room with people. You have to know how to give and take, adapt ideas. And you learn that. That's what you learn at university. Let's be honest. The university experience is about learning to live with people, learning to get your washing done and your rent paid, and also your work done. And if you don't have that experience, if you're sitting on the end of a Zoom tube, well, that's what the business will be. It'll be a Zoom business. And good luck to you with that, honestly. You know, I often quite, and it still blows my mind that somebody in the Edwardian period, in other words, 110 years ago now, wrote The Machine Stops, which is the M. Forster short story, which is exactly about the kind of world we'll live in if we're not very careful, which is a screen-bound world. How he wrote that in 1908, wherever it was. But if you haven't come across it, it's 60 pages. Get it and read it, because it's so prescient, and it's what it's saying is so important.
That goes to prove that there is one thing that will never change. And the reason why the pictures that we saw today were so successful was because at the heart of them they had some storytelling knowledge. Yes. And it doesn't matter what the medium is, whether it's a TikTok or whether it's, 20 episodes of Stranger Things. The storytelling has to be good, and we can still teach storytelling skills, and we must do.
Well, we started with painting on a cave wall, didn't we?
Yeah.
That's where we started.
My just to end on a positive note, I think that what will happen with the technology, and the technology will start to disappear a little bit, if not a lot. But actually, what will happen is it will drive the idea that story is the heart of everything, because there will be lots and lots of content, but the good stories will rise, and the good stories will kind of get reproduced and circulated. And in some ways, I think what will happen with the technology is that telling stories will become easier technologically, but actually having good stories and developing them will be just as hard.
Yeah.
Well, if anything, harder, because if you could argue, you can tell a story out through a Zoom broadcast, that's fine. The trouble is, where does the story come from? Because if your only interaction is with a Zoom screen, you're not going to have stories.
Yeah.
That's what I worry about, that we destroy the social. One of the ideas we had today was about just how antagonistic the whole world is, that everybody's part of a tribe that hates all the other tribes. We've got to do something about that. We've got to get some way of replacing the social cohesion and the social interaction. I think people, we had 2 students didn't turn up today because they're too nervous to come in and do a pitch. I mean, this is serious. This is a problem.
I have a great faith in humans to reinvent entertainment, and I think we're seeing that in the kind of experiential world. And there's a great example of this going on in China at the moment. You might have seen it, with people paying to go to bamboo farms and steal bamboo in the night and be chased by actors out of the bamboo farms. And it's like there's loads of media on
well, and
it.
We're talking about Traitors and Stranger Things, so on. Theatrical production, you can have the experience and so on. So people do still, and they're incredibly successful. People still want that stuff, and I think we will find ways of doing it. But it's not helpful if the place where people go for that 3 years when they're learning about the world is a virtual world. I
Right,
think that's
okay.
really dangerous, and I think the government should
Okay.
stop funding universities who don't insist on face-to-face contact.
Well, let's leave that one for whoever's the.
I just thought I'd drop that in.
So let me just bring to the end of today's episode and say a big, huge thank you to Emma and Paul for opening up the development room and sharing such honest reflections on how ideas grow and why some don't. I mean, I'm sure we could just sit here for hours
Yeah.
talking about this, really. I've always found it a really fascinating process, which is why we developed the module we do here, which is basically a development producer module, and we run it as one of our first modules, because actually that is the starting point for everything. Can you have ideas? Can you pitch them, communicate them, and then can you turn them into something? So I've really enjoyed this conversation. You can find more episodes online, of course, and hopefully we will have more episodes coming out, although I'm just about to move to China. So, but
You're going to be hunted in a bamboo forest.
yeah, entirely, I might go and do that. But I'm sure, China's not as technologically distant as it once was, so I'm sure we'll continue the series. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roy.
Thank you. And congratulations on the course.
Thank you.